Hello and welcome to week 8 of the season 2 on the MBC podcast. My name is Andrew Sellover. I'm joined again by JP Eisenhower and Connell Scruggs, and later by Andrew Feeney again for some college football talk. But first, we're going to start out with high school football and especially Marist football in the 4A playoffs getting started this week. It's an exciting time of year around Marist School when the playoffs come around. This week, Marist taking on Cedartown. But first, let's take a look through the 4A rankings, which came out today. In number 1 is Cartersville. Number 2 is Woodward Academy. Both of those teams are undefeated 10-0 and won their region. They are coming into the 4A playoffs as 1 seeds. Then Marist and Blessed Trinity, according to High School Football Daily, are tied for 3rd in the rankings. Both teams enter at 9-1. And Blessed Trinity taking this region championship over Marist in triple overtime 2 weeks ago. So BT enters as a 1 seed, Marist a 2 seed. Sandy Creek, number 5 in 4A, 9-1. Their only loss coming to Cartersville, and they enter the playoffs as a 2 seed. West Lawrence, 9-1, won their region, coming in at a 1 seed, the number 6 team in 4A. Oconee County 9-1, number 7 in 4A, also a 1 seed after taking down rival North Oconee to win the region championship in Region 8. Tied 8th are Denmark and Carver Columbus. Carver Columbus 9-1. Marist might face them in the second round, and if you want to see more about Carver Columbus and a bunch of other potential opponents for Marist and just general contenders for the 4A state title, go check out MBC Bracketology on MBC YouTube. Denmark, as I said, 7-2, 3rd in Region 7, tied 8th with Carver Columbus in the rankings, and Cairo enters at number 10, 8-2, also, I believe, 2nd in their region because they lost in double overtime to Carver Columbus. So that rounds out the top 10 in 4A. Most of those teams 1 or 2 seeds in the playoffs except for Denmark because they play in the hardest region in 4A. Now let's take a look at Marist versus Cedartown. Marist enters this week 9-1, tied 3rd in 4A, facing a 5-5 Cedartown team, but man, that record does not show at all how good this Cedartown team is.
Yeah, definitely not. I mean, the losses they have are to really good teams, and in a couple of games they hung in there. You saw the first game of their season, they played Rockmart, which is a 10-0 team in a larger classification. They have a loss there. They have a loss to Cartersville, and we know how good they are. And then they have a loss to Sandy Creek, which has a dynamic offense, and they only lost by 4. So they really hung in there in a lot of their losses, and if a couple games, went the other way, they could be an 8-2 team, really. I mean, if they didn't schedule Rockmart, that's just really a tough game. You're trying to get the team going at the beginning of the season. They could be a 7-3, 8-2 team, really, and definitely going to be a tougher first round matchup than usual.
In a different region, this team might be 9-1, 10-0 if they're playing in not Region 5, one of the top 2 regions in 4A.
Yeah, when you look at it, running back Kobe Pryor, quarterback Jaden Johnson, they've played great throughout the bottom half of the season. Jaden Johnson's really come on as the backup quarterback. He's a good runner. He's a hit or miss with passing, but I feel like he's accurate enough on the plays that matter. And I really like this offense going in. It's a run-heavy offense. And looking at the defense, one player you really have to watch is C.J. Washington, number 27. When you put on the tape, he is always around the quarterback. He is a pure pass rusher with great hands, and he's very quick and very powerful coming off the edge.
Yeah, and JP, you mentioned backup quarterback Jaden Johnson getting the start because in that Rockmart game to start the season, Taji Hudson, their starting quarterback for the year, senior, committed to Eastern Carolina, got hit in the midsection, internal injuries to his spleen and liver, was hospitalized for about a week, and is out for the rest of the year after week 1. So that was a tough loss for this offense. They were supposed to be a very dynamic offense coming into the year. He had a great arm, and they had the Clemson commit Kobe Pryor in the backfield. I spoke to head coach Kelly today, and he said now the game plan, just get Pryor, get Kobe Pryor the ball as much as you can. He is just a run right through you kind of back. He overpowers you. So that's going to be their game plan coming into this week, I believe. Just get him the ball
Feed him the
however
ball.
you can. Kind of a Kyle Hamilton type of player, great athlete. You saw in last year's playoffs, Marist was get Kyle Hamilton the ball. They'd run him on end arounds. They'd put him in the Wildcat. Anything you can to get the ball in his hands as much as possible. That's their game plan with Kobe Pryor. And JP, this is a great defense. You mentioned Cedric Washington, or CJ is his nickname.
CJ Washington, yep.
4-star defensive end, and he's only a sophomore. This dude has explosive moves on the outside, and Ian Erickson will be matching up with him. So that'll be an exciting matchup to watch in the trenches between the 300-pounder Erickson and 4-star defensive end sophomore Cedric Washington. That defense held Sandy Creek to 34 points, and that was the second lowest point total that Sandy Creek has been held to all year. 28, I think, is their season lowest. That's an explosive offense. We'll touch on them in a minute. But this is a great defense, and Marist needs to step up the offensive production this week.
Yeah, they're really good at getting turnovers, and they move a lot in the front seven. One thing I'm interested to see is they play predominantly a 4-3 defense. I'm wondering if they change that going against Marist, which is a triple option team, to get that nose tackle over the center and really disrupt that inside fullback area. A lot of teams have been doing that against Marist this season, going into a 3-4, and I feel like it's a lot more effective against the triple option than a 4-3 would be, especially with the fullback Lincoln Parker running up the middle.
A big problem for Marist this week is Derek McDonald, tight end and defensive end, is out entirely for the week with a broken wrist. He had surgery on it a couple weeks ago in a hard cast. They were thinking about rushing his comeback time to this week for defensive activities, still wearing a cast but playing on defense. He's not going to be playing at all. So that's a big loss offensively and defensively for the War Eagles. He'll likely, if Marist wins this week, be back on defense next week, and hopefully by the quarterfinals if Marist makes it that far back at tight end. But for offense, they're going to have to shift their focus to a bunch of other wide receivers. Hayden Malding will predominantly take over in that tight end position, and he's more of a blocking tight end. So expect Josh Moore, Matthew Houghton to get a bunch more targets. Even Justin Hartwell, I would guess, would be targeted more with the loss of Derek McDonald.
Also, watch out for Mitch Owens to have a huge role in this game.
Now we're going to move into looking at just the 4A bracket in general. Take a look at some of the best matchups this week. First matchup we'd like to take a look at is Blessed Trinity and Troop, but before we do that, we'll update you on our points standings and picks. Connell leads 34-18
Let's
in
go.
regular picks, 2-4 on his upset picks, 40 points.
I've been in the lead every single week.
I'm
Let me
at
just say
30-22 on regular picks. I got an upset pick last week with that huge Illinois comeback in the fourth quarter
crazy.
over Michigan State.
That was good.
That puts me at 39 points. I'm 1 point back of Connell, and JP 2 points back of me at 37 points. He has the best record in regular picks, 37-15. But JP, I believe last week you made it 0-7 on the upset picks, correct?
Yeah, Kelly. I kind of got blindsided by the fact Kelly Bryant wasn't starting for Georgia.
All right, let me just
Georgia.
Let me just
they
say
were gonna lose
Missouri
that
was
game.
losing anyway.
They're losing that
Powell.
game anyways, man.
We don't even have a chance. It's Powell. What did I
It-
mean? The
I mean,
second I
but
saw
they-
Powell come
you
out on
never
the
had a
field,
chance.
it was
They didn't have
over.
a chance with Bryant.
They
Let me
did
just
have a chance.
So the upset pick played continues for JP. Hasn't
And
gotten one all season.
One thing I'd like to mention about this 4A bracket is I mentioned earlier Region 5, Region 7, definitely the two best football regions in 4A. Region 5 having Troup County as their 4 seed, then Cedartown, then Sandy Creek, then Cartersville. Region 7, Flowery Branch at 4, then Denmark, then Marist, then Blessed Trinity. By far the two best regions in the GHSA in their bracket decide to match up Region 7 and Region 5 in the first round, and that's where we take a look at our big weeks of the big games of the week, and all three of them feature Region 7 versus Region 5 matchups. The first one we'll take a look at, Blessed Trinity and Troup. Connell, who do you like in this one?
I like Blessed Trinity. Troup County, we've been saying this, they just haven't been the team we've expected this year. Although they're not bad, they're just not the team we've expected them to be. They made it to the Final Four last year, and I don't know, but the way Blessed Trinity just looked with Elijah Green back in the offense and at full speed, man, it's going to be tough to stop that running attack with the best running back duo in the state, I think.
Yeah, there's a lot of around the entire bracket competitive games in the first round like we haven't really seen in the past, especially last year. I'm taking BT in this one. Elijah Green's a completely dominant runner. This is a dominant team, and I don't think that Troop can stop the run game for BT. They're more physical than Troop, and Carson Haroff, I feel like, is going to have a great game. Number 2, the wide receiver.
Do y'all both think BT wins big?
I think it's going to be close.
I'll say 2 touchdowns. I'm going to say 2 touchdowns.
I'm going to say 1 touchdown.
I think it's very close this week between Blessed Trinity and Troop, and I'll give you a reason why. Last week, Troop County hosted Cartersville, one of the best, number 1 ranked team in the state, and stuck with them through 3 quarters. They head into the fourth quarter tied up at 28 apiece, I believe. They ended up losing that one by 2 touchdowns. But last week they moved Kobe Hudson, their best athlete, one of the best athletes in the state, to quarterback. He's a 4-star wide receiver commit for Auburn. He's a similar player to Kyle Hamilton, maybe not as athletic, but he's very athletic. They moved him to quarterback from wide receiver, and that really gave their offense a spark plug, essentially running a wildcat, except that he can throw the ball really well, almost as well as their original quarterback. And he's just very tough to tackle, and he really created a problem for what is usually a very good Cartersville defense. They put up 28 in that one. So I think he's going to be a tough task for Blessed Trinity to stop. I just don't think that Troop County defense can stop the running back duo of Elijah Green and Justice Haynes. I think this one's a close one, but Blessed Trinity comes out on top. Connell, who do you like in Flowery Branch versus Cartersville?
I'm going to take Cartersville just because they've been pretty much dominant all year. I mean, you saw it in the Sandy Creek game. That was the biggest game they played all year, and they just totally outscored they put up 52, I believe. 52, yeah. It was 52-42 final, and T. Webb's really settling in, second-year quarterback committed to Louisville. I mean, he just looks good, making a lot of good passes, good reads. I think that Cartersville team, with their experience in the playoffs, that they're just going to get this one done in the first half.
I mean, you don't even have to say that much for this team. I'm taking Cartersville. T. Webb's played great. The defense has played incredible. And Flowery got destroyed by Denmark at the end of the season. With their backup quarterback, this is not the same team that we thought they'd be at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, JP, you mentioned their backup quarterback. This is a team similar to Cedartown that it's disappointing when you lose your quarterback early. Cedartown first week for Flowery Branch. Elijah Gainey went out in the preseason scrimmage. I mean, he's also a D1 commit. That's just so tough for these teams, and they have to turn almost all to the running game. And for Flowery, they don't have that top running back like Cedartown does, and their offensive production has really struggled. It's a pretty good defense, but their offense, I don't think, will be able to do anything against Cartersville, and Cartersville will win big. Denmark and Sandy Creek, potentially the most competitive matchup in 4A in the first round.
Mm-hmm.
Connell, who do you like?
I think it's gonna be a lot closer than some people think. I'm gonna go with Sandy Creek though. I mean, their offense is unprecedented. You mentioned the lowest they scored was 21, right?
28.
28. Yeah, let's just add
Correct.
7 more to that. 28. But that offense, I don't know if Denmark's defense can stop it. You saw it in the Marist game; they looked really, really vulnerable. And Sandy Creek, if they get the run game going, I don't know. I don't know how Denmark's going to keep up with them.
We could just completely ignore the defenses in this game because they just don't exist for either team. I mean, both teams have horrible defenses. But when you look at which offense you think is going to score more points, if the defenses are equal, Sandy Creek will score more points. I'd take in Sandy Creek.
Yeah,
let's go, JP.
This one could be a 54-50 game, honestly.
More than that.
In regular time.
I'm taking the over.
I would not be surprised if both teams put up at least 40 in this one. This is just offense galore, and you don't usually see that in high school.
If they both don't score 50, I'd be surprised.
High school, you usually see a bunch of defensive battles more than you see offense, and this one's just high-powered offenses. I like Aaron McLaughlin. I like Xavion Capers. I like that Denmark offense, I think, more than I like that Sandy Creek offense. Denmark at least has some sort of defense, I guess.
Not really.
Sandy Creek gave up 52 to Cartersville. They're giving up just boatloads of points. I mean, Cartersville held Cedartown to 2 points, no offensive points, and Sandy Creek gave up 30 to them.
Does the Denmark offensive line and running game hurt that decision at all, though?
No, because I don't think Sandy Creek's getting a pass rush anyway. I don't think Sandy Creek stops them. I think Denmark wins, but this one's going to be a wild one to watch. We're going to transition to college football. We're going to welcome on Andrew Feeney again this week for some college football talk. And first up, let's talk about each of our top 5 rankings and one team to watch. JP, who's your top 5 for this week?
For number 1, I obviously got LSU. Alabama, that big win over Alabama. LSU's much better team than Ohio State at this point. Due to strength of schedule, I have to put LSU above them, although I think Ohio State matches them in talent, which is why I put them number 2. Ohio State's played incredible all season, explosive offense, great defense with Chase Young, who will be back soon. And then at number 3, I have Clemson. They're undefeated. They haven't done anything wrong but have a bad schedule. I can't punish them for that. And I do put them above number 4, Alabama, who lost to LSU. You have to put the undefeated proven teams at numbers 1, 2, and 3, and the one-loss teams come after. At number 5, Minnesota. Minnesota has played incredible, and they had a signature win last week over Penn State. I was really considering even putting them over Alabama at this point just because of that really big win, and Alabama hasn't had that big win. My one team to watch, Georgia. Georgia will most likely be in the SEC championship, and if they beat LSU, they're in.
Yeah, and I'm going to agree with JP's top 4 there. I'm going to go LSU. They just beaten better competition than Ohio State is, although, like you said, they got the talent to compete with them. So I'm going to go LSU, Ohio State at 2, Clemson at 3, Alabama at 4, just because I think the way Alabama's been playing and the way Alabama played to fight back in that LSU game after going down big in the first half, to be able to fight back, basically clawing their way back in the second half with Tua only 20 days after surgery and not really practicing. I think, they have a chance when he gets healthy to compete. So Alabama at 4, and then I'm going to put Georgia at 5, and then team to watch, I'm going to have Minnesota just because of that win over Penn State. I think they proved they're legit in that win, and they've definitely thrust themselves into the playoff conversation.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of yours, Connell, but I'm going to have to go with my number 1. I think it's obvious, LSU. I don't think many people will dispute that. Obviously the most complete team out of everyone, battle-tested and just a solid team. Number 2, got to go Ohio State. I love everything about their team, too. Offense is really solid, led by Justin Fields. And that defense, even though they won't have Chase Young, I think this week or next week, is it just
he's missing Maryland and Rutgers?
Yeah, he's eligible to come back for Penn State.
Not a big factor. So when they get the big games going again, he'll be back. Number 3, Clemson. I mean, I hate their schedule, but they're 10-0. I mean, you can't despite that, and they're a good team. Reigning national champions, got to put them up there. Then number 4, I'm gonna go Georgia. And I know, Connell, you don't like that. You would put Alabama there, but
it's
Georgia,
definitely close.
It's
definitely close.
It's close, but here's the thing: Georgia is battle tested. They've played tough games and they've won tough
South
games.
Carolina.
Hey yo,
I'm
just gonna bring up the South Carolina loss at home.
I'm acknowledging that. I'm saying they did.
Who has the better loss?
At home.
Alabama
does have the better loss.
Who has Georgia played again?
They played Florida.
Notre Dame.
Notre Dame showing their
They played Florida.
They played Florida.
They
good
beat
teams.
Florida. They beat Notre Dame.
Notre Dame's not as good of a win anymore.
It really
as
isn't.
it was
but
toward the
the
beginning.
Florida win still looks
The Florida
good.
win is definitely their marquee win. I'm gonna say that because they dominated that game. They were never really behind.
And Alabama's marquee win is over Mississippi State.
Yeah. So
not Mississippi
Or not
State,
Mississippi,
Texas A&M.
Ole Miss.
wow.
No,
wow.
Texas A&M.
I mean,
I'd say
very-
Texas
Texas
A&M is
isn't even
probably the
ranked
best
anymore.
team they've played.
None of the teams they've played are ranked anymore.
Well, yeah, but at the time, Texas A&M was ranked. Yeah, I acknowledge that Alabama is they played nobody, but they definitely have the better loss than Georgia does. That's gonna look ugly to the committee.
We'll see what
That's
happens.
South Carolina loss.
We'll see what happens. And number 5, I'll go Bama. Yeah, still a really good team. That 4 and 5 is close, but for me right now, strength of schedule, I gotta go Georgia.
I agree with you, JP, about LSU and Ohio State. I think Ohio State will beat LSU if they face them. but I
Ooh.
think LSU is more battle tested.
I want to see an
Yeah.
Ohio State versus LSU
That
national
would-
That would be a
championship.
great
That would
game.
be a fun
That'd be a
game.
great game
Because,
to watch. I think those are the two teams we've wanted to see
Or
all
the game,
season
the game
match
no
up.
one wants to see, Clemson versus Alabama.
Oh my gosh.
So I think LSU just takes the top spot just because of who they've played, who they've beaten. You can't argue with that. Ohio State goes second. I think at number 3, I like Clemson. Number 4, Alabama. I can't really put Alabama above Clemson because Alabama lost,
Yeah.
but I think Alabama's better than Clemson. I think Alabama's better than LSU, actually. I just think they didn't
Whoa,
play
whoa,
well.
whoa,
Whoa, wait.
You think?
No,
that
Did you not see that
Alabama-
first
That's
half?
fair.
That first half.
But
I know.
okay,
ugly.
but the
If
thing
those
is, you gotta
teams-
acknowledge is
if
Tua
those
is
teams
20
played-
days
They
off,
never
off
led
of
the-
surgery.
They
But
never
they
led in the
lost.
game. They
They
never led
lost.
in the
I
game.
don't care if they lost. If Alabama
Their
plays
defense
LSU,
looked horrible.
Hey,
if
I'm agree
Alabama
with that
plays
statement.
LSU again,
Well,
Of
you're a
course you do.
Bama
You're an
fan. You're an
Alabama fan.
Alabama.
No, but the way
If
the same scenario
I
happened.
Can't believe
The
the-
same scenario happened in 2012. Alabama lost to LSU in the regular season. They played in the national championship. Bama beat
If-
the brakes off of them.
Much different
Yes.
teams. LSU's
No,
offense is
I'm
much
sorry.
different.
It is a very much
I'm
different
sorry,
team.
Alabama. If Alabama plays LSU
Ooh,
again,
you-
Alabama will win.
You think Nick Saban's losing twice to LSU in
It's
one season?
not
I don't think
happening.
that happened.
If Alabama
'Cause
plays
they're not gonna
LSU,
play again.
there's a good chance.
Alabama's
there-
playoff
there's
chances
definitely
are
a good
question in the
chance.
question.
Wow.
There's a good chance that
saying
it's 1
Alabama's-
versus 4.
LSU
Alabama's
just
playoff question.
beat Bama.
Playoffs.
But you're saying Bama is better than LSU.
Correct. I think if they play again, Alabama
That makes
wins.
no sense.
I think that it's definitely possible that they play again because I think LSU's going to win out, and I think the committee, if they have a total like all the one-loss teams in a bunch, they're going to pick Alabama just because
Yeah.
All right.
It's
just 'cause
Alabama.
it's not
Andrew,
right.
Let's go to your number. Let's
Hey.
go to your number 5.
Yeah, come on.
So
Ah, Wiki.
Alabama at 4, Minnesota at 5. I think Minnesota.
You got
I
the
mean,
same as me.
Georgia. Correct.
We
Georgia.
agree for once.
Georgia hasn't. Well, I do think Alabama's better than LSU, but Georgia.
Then put them above them. Put
no,
Alabama
don't-
above
no, that's just
LSU.
wrong. That's just
No,
wrong,
I
dude.
can't do that. But Georgia, they just South Carolina lost. I can't get over that one.
Agreed.
And my team to watch, I'm kind of in between a couple. I think Penn State still has a chance. Penn State still controls their own destiny. If they win out, they're in the playoffs
Yeah,
because they'll
yeah.
have beaten Ohio State and they'll have avenged
That's
For
their
true.
sure.
I forgot
They'll
about
have
that
avenged-
Ohio State game's huge.
they'll have avenged their loss to Minnesota.
I forgot to
So-
yeah, I forgot to say my team to watch. I think it's Oregon. Just kind of the same way. They have a really good loss at Auburn, and the first game of the season. If they win out and win the Pac-12 championship, I feel like that's a really.
I don't think
Yeah.
they're in there.
I think Penn State.
Convincing though.
I don't think if
I'm
okay, go
still watching Penn State, and yeah, I think Penn State. I don't have any reason to believe why they can't compete in their game against Ohio State. I do think Ohio State will win that one, but I'd be careful because they looked very good against Michigan in the first half of that game. If they put together a complete game like they played the first half against Michigan, I think they have a good chance against
There's
Ohio
a
State.
bunch of one-loss teams
Yep.
now that are in the conversation because there's going to be that at-large number 4 seed, and you think that as long as the wheels don't fall off, the top 3 teams are going to stay pretty much 1, 2, 3,
Mm-hmm.
and that 4th seed is going to be it's going to change because Georgia's going to play LSU in the SEC championship. And if Georgia loses that game, they're pretty much done. They got 2 losses. They're not in.
I think
So-
this might be like the best college football playoff season we've
Yes,
had ever.
I would agree.
This
It's
is
the
a
co-
lot of
this
very
goes into-
equal
Let me-
teams.
Let me
Yeah.
just say, if things play out like we think they could play out, the committee's going to have a very
Woo.
tough
Yeah,
choice.
because
Plus, also,
imagine
this plays into expanding the playoffs also to
Yeah,
8
they got-
teams.
no,
Oh
they
my
gotta
gosh, they
expand the
have to.
playoffs.
8
That would,
teams.
if
That's
you
all
look
we
at the
ask.
top 8
Oh,
teams
man.
for this year,
Yes.
they are
I could
all
s-
of them
yeah.
could
They
beat
got to
each other.
expand the playoffs.
There's no one team that doesn't have a chance against one of the other teams. They could all beat each other.
I definitely agree. I think the consensus has got to be it's got to be an 8-team
I
playoff
want
'cause
8 teams.
there's so little in between the 4 and 5
Exactly.
seed that it's like, oh, you just got to
Especially
include them. You
last
got to give
year.
them a
Yeah,
chance.
even
You know?
Last year with
Sometimes-
Georgia and Oklahoma, that huge conversation.
Oh, that was bad. Yeah.
Georgia, I felt like was the better team.
I don't know. I feel
I like
Oklahoma-
Georgia better.
That's a whole different debate.
Yeah.
Though.
Yeah.
It needs to be 8 teams. I just don't think there's any
I think they
question.
have it until 2020 where it's 4 teams. So
Mhm.
it's definitely. I think they would after that the committee's going to meet, and I think they're going to make it 8 teams just because of what the public wants, and
Let's make it
that's
24,
pretty much what
25
drives.
teams.
That's what drives revenue,
Wouldn't
and
it-
they're going to do what the public
25
wants.
teams.
Wouldn't it be awesome if it was like 16 teams?
No,
That'd be
I don't think
amazing.
that'd be.
I like.
I'd like
I don't like the
I don't
16
hate
team
it.
I'd
because
like
it's
it
going
for
to be
the
1 versus
upsets.
16.
No.
and like
I don't-
exactly.
Yeah,
No.
one easily beats 16. Like
I don't
But
hate it.
App- one
App
eight is-
That's
State
what
would
everybody
have a
thinks.
chance
Hey,
of
that's
getting
what
in that
everybody
one.
thinks in college basketball, and then
no, but college basketball is so different.
It
It's
is.
I
so
don't know,
different.
but I feel
Basketball
like
is
it
just a
would be
different
fun.
sport than
March
football in
Madness
terms
versus
of
college
upsets.
football playoff, you can't even compare.
This
'em.
isn't basketball though. Let's go to the next
Yeah.
question.
I mean, if you look at 1 versus 16, LSU versus Notre Dame, that's not even a game. LSU blows them out of the water.
That's
You
true.
just-
Feeney's
just-
sitting over there, Notre
Hey,
Dame fan. He's
hey,
like,
Feeney,
bro.
Feeney, respond.
Feeney, what's going on
Respond.
over
That's
there,
not
man?
true. They wouldn't get blown out.
They would.
They would.
They got destroyed
They
by.
got blown out
They
by
got destroyed
Michigan,
by
man.
Michigan.
And then Ohio State, Wisconsin, that's a blowout. Clemson,
It already
Michigan,
was a blowout.
another blowout.
Yeah, no,
So-
I think the
8
8 team
Eight
because
teams
is
is
solid.
1 could compete with 8 theoretically. 8
Yes.
could compete
Wait,
with
let's-
1 theoretically,
Yes.
and that's a game. It's the 116 that I don't know about that. That's when it starts to
Yeah.
become little.
Yeah,
excessive.
1 versus 16, you start getting in 3 and 4 and 5 teams from a conference, and it's like, what's the point?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you look at it, right,
yeah.
Minnesota versus LSU. I mean, that's a solid game.
You're looking at the. Are you looking at
These are week
AP?
12
That's
rankings.
a that's a AP
That's
poll
AP.
though.
It's AP,
poll
but I
doesn't
mean,
matter.
Yeah,
That's irrelevant now.
It's
Well,
literally
none of the
There's
polls
no
really
point in-
matter.
No.
Yeah.
but in theory, it'd be a good game. I feel
Yeah.
like all these top
Yeah.
8 teams can compete.
Let's move into some picks for this week, week 10 in college football. Minnesota versus Iowa. This is an interesting one. Minnesota coming off a big win at home. Now they have to go on the road and keep the emotions in check coming off their biggest win in school history. Connell, who do you like in this one?
I like Minnesota. Just you talked about the way they looked against Penn State. They proved. I've said this many times, but I think that game proves they're legit. We had a lot of questions about them because they hadn't played anyone, and there were some games that came down to the wire for them that were not supposed to be close. And I think that gave them a spark, and they're going to come into this game. They're going to beat Iowa at home, which is a really hard thing to do.
Yeah, Minnesota's played incredible. I have to take them. I mean, you look at Tanner Morgan, 90% completion percentage for 339 yards and 3 touchdowns with 0 interceptions versus that Penn State defense. It's absolutely incredible. And then this Minnesota defense has played great too, especially Antoine Winfield Jr. He had 9 tackles in the last game and 2 key interceptions in that Penn State game. I'm going to take Minnesota in this one.
Yeah, I think I gotta go Minnesota just 'cause of the what they're riding on. That momentum right now is really, really good for them. It's gonna be a really close one though, 'cause of at Iowa. That's tough. But yeah, I'm gonna go with Minnesota.
Yeah, I agree with you, Feeney. This one's a close one, and it's tough.
Don't you take Iowa.
It's tough for
Do
Minnesota.
not take Iowa.
It's tough for Minnesota to come back off such a big win in their program. I mean, it's so hard to come off that big of a win, that big of a celebration for your program, and come back and back it up the week later against another top 20 team. Iowa played well last week against Wisconsin.
It's Wisconsin,
but
though.
I really like Minnesota's coach.
There we go.
I really like Minnesota's coach.
Yeah.
He's doing
Fleck is
great
doing
great things. PJ Fleck, he just brought all the energy to Minnesota last week. He's brought it the whole year. They got him extended. I think he gets his team ready again for this week. I think Minnesota wins by a touchdown. Next game we're going to take a look at is a big one in the SEC. It's Georgia versus Auburn. I said it at the beginning of the year. I think Auburn has the chance to ruin someone's season. I didn't think they would have a chance at the playoffs just because of how hard their schedule was, but I said they ruin an SEC team's season, and this week's the week I think Auburn goes in
Whoa.
and ruins Georgia's chances at the playoffs.
Bold pick.
Yeah, you don't like
I
Bo
mean,
Nix over there, do you?
I'm not a big. If you've listened in the past, you know I'm not a big Bo Nix guy.
The reason
Not
I
a
picked
big Bo Nix guy.
the
You
reason-
hate him.
Yeah, the reason I
that
picked
man.
Auburn is just because the defense is incredible. They shut down LSU, and you saw how
Yeah,
good
they
LSU's
did.
offense was.
Mhm.
But that defense is one of the best in college. I think
Georgia's
they
is
shut down
better.
Yeah.
Georgia.
And I think Georgia has
No, they're not.
I'm gonna pick
Hasn't
Georgia.
allowed a rushing touchdown.
Georgia's
season.
defense is not as good as Auburn. I'm sorry.
It's good. I don't think it's
Equal.
as good as Auburn, but it's definitely good. And I'm gonna say Bo Nix has struggled against good defenses this season, and Georgia, they're a good defense. And I think they have a really good secondary. It's going to cause trouble for Bo Nix. And I'll give him credit. He's a freshman. He's definitely going to improve, and I think he'll be a good quarterback in a couple of years. But as far as this year, he struggled when he's faced good secondaries. You see Florida, he threw a lot of bad picks. He threw a couple bad picks and made the wrong reads. He just missed open passes, and I think, against Georgia with their running attack with DeAndre Swift, I think they'll be able to power through that Auburn defense. And I'm gonna take Georgia.
Yeah, when you look at it, Auburn has a slight edge on defense. Georgia has a slight edge in the offensive line. They have pretty equal running games. It comes down to which quarterback I want to pick, and I will take from any day. I'm picking Georgia to win this one.
I like Auburn. It's just that Bo Nix is so young. I mean,
Bo
2
Nix
years.
versus Fromm.
It's just not a competition right now. He will be a great player. But yeah, right now it's Jake Fromm and that really good Georgia defense. Even though Auburn's defense is good, it's just their offense is so stagnant sometimes. Again, especially against good defenses, Georgia's the clear winner here.
By how much, Finney?
I'm gonna say 2 touchdowns.
I'm going to go 1 touchdown.
I'm going to go 7.
Auburn by a field goal. Oklahoma versus Baylor. This is college game day for the week. A big matchup
Good
in the
game.
Big
It's
12.
a really big college football playoff.
It is because if
Yeah,
Baylor, I can't say that Baylor's proved themselves through this
they
year.
haven't.
I have to take Oklahoma. Baylor did not look good last week. They honestly should have lost to TCU.
Yeah.
What was that? Double overtime, triple overtime?
I think it was double
It
or
was
triple.
double.
It was a good game, though.
It was a good game. They're just sloppy, Baylor is. I feel like they're too sloppy to get a big-time win against Oklahoma.
I'm also going to take Oklahoma here just because Baylor has played so many. If they were a legit team, I think a lot of the teams on their schedule they should have beat by a lot. You look here. You mentioned the TCU game. They beat West Virginia by a field goal. They beat Texas Tech in overtime by 3, and Texas Tech is not. No, they should not be beating
BK
Texas
State
Tech by.
pretty good, though.
They should not
They know
be-
how to win games, though.
They shouldn't be beating Texas Tech by 3 in overtime, and they beat Iowa State by 2. So, you look.
They've learned how to win close games.
Yeah.
That's all I'll say. But they
But
haven't.
I mean, it all. It's like
not good enough.
it's like a fragile building. You push. It's like a fragile Jenga tower. You push one little block, and that whole thing's coming down. I
When
think
did this
that-
go to Jenga?
it's an analogy, JP. Okay, so, and I think Oklahoma's that finger that just pushes that Jenga block, and then things coming down. 'Cause Baylor's about to have a loss
I
after
like
this
it. That's a
game.
good analogy.
All right,
Yeah.
I'm
I
not
thought
going
that
to
That was prophetic, right
It
there.
was a good analogy, but I'm not going to use a Jenga analogy. I will, however, agree with you in taking Oklahoma. I think it's going to be a lot closer than the spread shows. I believe it's like a 10-point spread. I think Oklahoma by a field goal. Oklahoma and
Oklahoma's
Baylor.
covering. You heard
They
it here
both-
first.
Yes, they are. They're winning by 20.
I feel like I've been banging the table for Baylor all season, but they've played too close against teams that they really should be blowing out. The signature win over K-State, though, looks a lot better now than it did before, but I still feel like this Oklahoma offense is too much for Baylor to be able to keep up with.
I'm going with Oklahoma, but I really want Baylor to win because think about how cool it would be if Baylor upsets Oklahoma.
Baylor could make it
And
into the playoff
I mean,
conversation.
yeah, Baylor is in the playoff
They'd
conversation.
have to
if
beat
they
'em
win this
again.
week.
In
I
the
mean,
Big
still,
12
though,
championship.
They're in the conversation at least.
If Baylor wins this week and wins out, and then they lose in the Big 12 championship to Oklahoma, would they have a chance?
No, they're not.
No.
They're out.
Probably not. But yeah, I just don't think that they have the. I mean, there's a chance. I don't think that they'll lose by 20 at all. I think the spread does not cover. I think Baylor has a chance in this one, not a good one, but yeah, I think they could win this game.
But you're taking Oklahoma.
Yeah, I'm
Oklahoma's
taking Oklahoma.
covering.
I
They are covering.
I want Baylor to win so badly, but I know they're not going to. It's probably going to be Oklahoma in this one.
Time for our upset picks this week. Last week, JP got his wrong again.
All right.
Connell,
We're gonna take
yours
digs at
was
my
close.
upset
Yours
pick.
was
Mine.
close.
Wyoming took Boise State to overtime and then lost by a field
Boise
goal.
State has played a bunch of close games that shouldn't have been close. As I said earlier, Illinois scored 27 in the fourth quarter to get me a win. And Feeney, what did you pick last week?
Last week,
You
I
picked over Oklahoma. He
I
picked
was
against.
close. I picked
Iowa State.
Iowa State over Oklahoma.
That was a 1-point game.
We could. Iowa State could have won
Wow.
that game.
Yeah, a lot of close upset picks except for JP.
Yep.
I did not know Kelly
I mean,
Bryant
the
was not
book-
going to start. I got blindsided.
I don't
want to
hear about
after
Kelly
the
Bryant.
podcast.
That was
How
a-
did you not know
That was a
'Cause
20.
he wasn't.
It was
it
all
was-
over the news.
It wasn't
was a
until after the podcast was
No.
recorded.
That was a 20-point
looked at
game,
that.
no matter
Even
what.
the spread at the
That was
time
nuts.
was
Alright.
already like 20
All right,
points.
whatever. Kelly Bryant, I'll give you a healthy Kelly Bryant that's like
It's
on
still-
crack, and he's still losing by 20 to Georgia.
Yeah.
Okay, but
Connell-
this week I got a
JP,
good one.
you getting it right this week?
I feel like this one. I think I'm on to something this week because I've decided not to pick teams I really like and to pick teams I think are gonna win.
Whoa. You were going to pick Missouri again.
I was going to, but that's not a 10-point spread, so I'm going to pick the smart pick instead. I'm going to take Stanford over Washington State. Washington State's been up and down all season, really inconsistent, and I really like Stanford's quarterback, KJ Costello. I think he's going to be a great NFL player in the future. I feel like Stanford's a sneaky good team, and they have a really good defense. And the running game with Cameron Scarlett, I feel like they're built for an upset like this. And when you look at the Washington State, they're 1-5 in the Pac-12. They don't have a great record against Pac-12 teams, and I think Stanford can pull this one out.
You think KJ Costello is going to be an NFL quarterback?
I think he could. I don't think
Hey,
a starter.
breaking news!
I don't think a
Breaking
starter,
news!
but he can-
Stanford lost to UCF by 20 points.
Yeah, they
just
haven't
watch.
looked great. All right,
We'll see.
JP thinks this is going to be the one to
State-
change,
Wash
turn it
State-
all around.
Man,
It's
Wash
not.
State hasn't looked great all season either, though.
All right, I'm gonna go with Indiana over Penn State. I think that Indiana is hot this year, and Penn State is really struggling after that loss to Minnesota. Probably not in a great state of mind, thinking they can walk all over this Indiana team. I think Indiana actually has a really good chance to upset them.
I'm going to take Kansas this week. Les Miles has done some interesting things up there at Kansas. They've played well in the big games. They've played poorly in the not big games. I mean, you saw with Texas, they took Texas to the wire, losing by 2 points. And then Oklahoma, they held them close for a little bit there. They beat Texas Tech. But then they lose to Kansas State by 28, and then they lose to TCU by like 40, and then they lose to West Virginia. But when they're playing these ranked teams, they play well. It's a weird thing that Kansas has going this year.
They played their competition's level. That's pretty much
yeah,
Maybe
they
some
do.
PEDs involved, maybe.
But-
Going back to his LSU roots.
But I think Les Miles gets his team fired up for this week, and I think they pull the upset over a ranked team in Oklahoma State.
All right, I'm going to pick the Georgia State Panthers over App State. Georgia State's actually looked pretty good coming in to this game. They suffered a loss last week, 45-31 to ULM, but other than that, they've actually looked pretty good in their conference, especially coming into this one. And I think they have the chance. They can match up with App State. I think their coach, Georgia State's coach, is from Boone, North Carolina, which is where App State is, and I think he's going to come into this one trying to get a win, and they have a chance. Hey, they beat Army. They got a chance.
As Lee Corso says, not so fast. App State last week getting a win over South Carolina in a South Carolina.
Didn't you just criticize South Carolina?
Yeah,
And
Whatever.
say that they
we were
aren't a
just
good team?
railing on South
well,
Carolina.
for App
I
State,
bet-
it's a big win.
It's
and-
not different
and
than the teams.
in a South Carolina
I hate
stadium
that.
where in overtime there were more App State fans than there were South Carolina fans.
Fans don't affect it as much
hey,
as you think.
Hey,
App State has played well this
Unless
year.
you're
Yeah,
an
but,
LSU
hey, you look
Death
you
Valley.
you look at Georgia State's rushing attack. Trey Barnett, he's got over. He's
Who did
got
you say
11.
they lost to?
What?
Who did you say they lost to though? Last week. Who did they
Oh,
lose to again?
Louisiana Monroe.
Yeah, exactly.
Connell,
Hey.
didn't they play Minnesota earlier though? Pretty sure they played
Who,
Minnesota.
Georgia State?
Georgia State.
I'm not sure.
I'm pretty sure they played Minnesota to
All right.
a very good game.
I think they got Trey Barnett. He's got 1,100 yards, 10 touchdowns. Hey, they run for about 274 yards a game.
How's App State's run defense? Pretty nuts.
Let's see. They give up 148 rushing yards a game.
That's not
That's
horrible.
terrible.
It's
That's
not
pretty-
no,
That's
not.
pretty good for college.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty good. The only thing that concerns me is Georgia State's defense. They give up about 460 yards a game.
Oh,
So,
no.
I mean, you catch some fire on offense, you got a chance to make
It's a Sandy
make a
Creek,
boom.
Sandy Creek type team over
Hey,
there.
you got a chance to make a boom. You get they do outscore they do outgain their defense though. 485 yards on average. That's what they're putting up.
My bad on Minnesota. That was actually Georgia Southern that lost to
Yeah,
Minnesota
Southern.
by 3.
Oh,
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, see,
Georgia
that's
Southern
what
for-
made me question Minnesota in the beginning of the season because they were playing games like that, and I was like, oh, I don't
Georgia
know if
Southern
they're
hasn't
legit.
played horribly, though. They haven't played horribly. They've taken some pretty good teams to some close games.
Like who, JP?
I forget the name of the team. I know. I remember Georgia Southern. No, I remember Georgia Southern.
Georgia Southern beat App State, actually.
Hey,
That's the one loss for App State on the season.
That was it. App
Yeah.
State.
hey, if Georgia
Yeah.
Southern, hey, another
Georgia Southern's a good team.
another Georgia team's got a chance. Georgia State this
Yeah.
time.
Georgia Southern's played well this year. Well, that'll do it pretty much for this week on the podcast. As we said earlier, big game in the playoffs this week for Marist. One of their biggest first-round games in a while. This one reminds me of that Sandy Creek Marist game a couple years ago in the first round that Marist lost in overtime, unfortunately. But it's a big first-round game. It's not one of these games that will be like a blowout like last year's first round. Cedartown's a very good team. So be sure to tune in live on the NFHS Network at 7:10 on Friday night for our pregame show, and then live at 7:30. I believe we will have Mr. Etheridge commentating with a student commentator. Yet to get that confirmed, but it'll be an exciting matchup, and hope to have you join us live on the NFHS Network for that one. If you're interested in more in-depth analysis of the GHSA 4A playoff bracket, be sure to check out MBC Bracketology on MBC YouTube channel. But other than that, we thank you for tuning in this week. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on the MBC Sports Podcast.